S- The city park sat between two busy streets, wrapped in iron fencing that most people barely noticed anymore. It was the kind of park people used without thinking, joggers cutting through in the morning, parents dropping children at the playground, office workers eating lunch on benches while scrolling their phones. In one corner of the park, near the old oak trees, a man arrived every single day before sunrise. He unlocked a small storage shed, took out a broom, a trash bag, and a set of tools, and began his work in silence. His name was Daniel Harper, though almost no one knew it. To most people, he was simply the cleaner. He wore simple clothes, always the same faded jacket and cap, and his shoes were scuffed from years of walking these paths. He moved carefully, as if the ground itself mattered. He picked up trash others dropped without a second thought, wiped benches clean, fixed loose bolts on swings, and made sure broken glass never stayed long enough to hurt bare feet. He never complained. He never rushed. He worked like the park belonged to him. By 8 in the morning, the park changed. Cars lined the street. Parents arrived with strollers and coffee cups. Children ran ahead, shouting and laughing. Daniel stepped aside when they passed, nodding politely, sometimes smiling. Some parents smiled back. Most didn't look at him at all. A few watched him with mild suspicion, eyes following his movements a little too closely. One morning, a woman whispered to her friend, "Why is he always here?" Her friend shrugged. "It's his job, I guess." They both laughed softly, as if that explained everything. Jed Neal heard them. He always did. Had learned long ago that hearing didn't require reacting. He focused on the playground, where the swings creaked softly in the breeze. He tightened a bolt that had been loosening for days. As he worked, memories surfaced uninvited. Familiar years ago, he had worn a uniform very different from these clothes. Years ago, people had looked at him with relief instead of doubt. Sirens had followed him, not whispers. But those days were behind him now, folded neatly into a past he didn't talk about. Around mid-morning, the park filled with sound. Children climbed the jungle gym. Parents chatted on benches. A group of teenagers played basketball nearby. Daniel swept the path slowly, stopping to collect a candy wrapper someone had dropped just feet from a trash can. He bent down carefully, his shoulders stiff from an old injury. A father sitting nearby noticed him and frowned. "They should really hire younger people for this," he said to no one in particular. "Looks like he can barely move." Daniel straightened slowly and continued sweeping. Near the playground, a small boy climbed higher than he should have. He was laughing, fearless, unaware of the height beneath him. Daniel noticed immediately. He had always noticed things like that. He watched the boy's grip slip, just slightly, and felt his body tense. "Careful!" Daniel called out, his voice calm but firm. The boy didn't hear him. In the next instant, the child's hand lost its hold. His body tilted backward, feet leaving the bar. Parents screamed. Someone shouted his name. Daniel dropped his broom and ran. Years of instinct took over. He reached the child just in time, twisting his own body to shield him as they hit the ground. Pain exploded through Daniel's shoulder and ribs, sharp and blinding. He gritted his teeth, but didn't let go. The child was crying, scared but alive. The park fell silent. Parents rushed forward, panic replacing judgment. A mother grabbed the boy from Daniel's arms, hugging him tightly. She didn't say thank you. She didn't look at Daniel at all. Her eyes stayed on her child, wide with fear. Daniel tried to stand. Pain shot through him, forcing him back down. He took a slow breath, checking himself the way he had taught others to do long ago. A man pointed at him. Why was he touching the kid? He asked loudly. He grabbed him out of nowhere. Another voice added, Daniel looked up, confused and hurting. He fell, Daniel said quietly. I caught him. A security officer approached, alerted by the commotion. He glanced at Daniel, then at the parents. Sir, you need to step away. Daniel raised his hand slightly. I was helping. The officer's expression hardened. Are you family? No. Then you shouldn't be handling children. Daniel swallowed, feeling something heavier than pain settle in his chest. He nodded and tried again to stand. This time, his legs shook. An ambulance arrived soon after, called for the child. Paramedics checked him quickly and confirmed he was fine. As they packed up, one paramedic noticed Daniel sitting on the ground, pale and sweating. Sir, are you injured? She asked. Daniel nodded. I think so. She examined him briefly. You need to be checked too. The security officer hesitated. He's not involved. The paramedic looked at him sharply. He absolutely is. Daniel was helped into the ambulance. As the doors closed, he caught sight of the playground through the window, the swings, the slide, the bench he had repaired just last week. People stood watching, their faces unreadable. Acto. At the hospital, doctors confirmed what Daniel already suspected: a fractured shoulder and bruised ribs. They gave him pain medication and wrapped his arm in a sling. As he lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, a nurse asked gently, Do you have someone we should call? Daniel thought for a long moment. No, he said softly. Thick evening. A video began circulating online. Someone had filmed the moment from across the park. The video showed Daniel running, catching the child, taking the fall. It didn't show the whispers or the accusations. It didn't show the way people had looked at him before the incident. It only showed what mattered. The comments exploded. He saved that kid. Why did people treat him like that? Who is this man? A local reporter recognized something familiar in the way Daniel moved, the way he spoke to the child after the fall. She started digging. Records surfaced. Daniel Harper had been a firefighter for over 20 years. He had responded to hundreds of calls, rescued dozens of people, and received commendations he never displayed. He had retired quietly after a fire that took the lives of 2 colleagues and left him injured. The park renovation. Funded largely by a private donation from a small foundation under Daniel's name. The next morning, people came to the park earlier than usual. Some brought coffee. Some brought flowers. A few brought handwritten notes. The playground was clean, untouched, waiting. Daniel didn't arrive. By afternoon, a small crowd had gathered near the oak trees. Parents whispered. Children asked questions. The same security officer stood near the gate, avoiding eye contact. Late in the day, Daniel appeared at the park entrance. His arm was in a sling. His movements were slower, more careful. Conversations stopped. People turned to look. A woman stepped forward, tears in her eyes. You saved my son, she said. I didn't even thank you. Daniel nodded gently. He's okay. That's what matters. Others followed. Apologies spilled out, awkward and sincere. Some admitted they had judged him. Some admitted they had been afraid for no reason. A man in an expensive coat cleared his throat. Why didn't you tell us who you were? He asked. Daniel looked around at the park to children, the benches, the trees swaying softly in the wind. Because it shouldn't matter, he said. Help is help. Respect shouldn't depend on a title. 2. The park slowly returned to life. Children ran back to the playground. Laughter filled the air again. Daniel picked up his broom with his good hand and walked toward the swings. For the first time, people made space for him. Nothing about Daniel had changed. Only the way people saw him had Jenya didn't return to the park the very next day. His doctor had insisted he rest, and for once, he listened. The apartment felt smaller than usual, quieter in a way that pressed against his chest. He kept the window open, letting in distant city noise, pretending it was enough. On the kitchen table lay the crayon drawing the little boy had given him. Daniel glanced at it more often than he admitted to himself. When he finally did return to the park a few days later, the morning felt different. The air carried a strange awareness, as if the place itself remembered what had happened. He unlocked the storage shed slowly, careful with his injured shoulder, and stepped back onto the familiar paths. People noticed him immediately. A jogger slowed down, nodding at him. A woman walking her dog said, "Good morning," with a sincerity he wasn't used to hearing. A father lifted his coffee cup slightly in greeting. None of it was dramatic. None of it was loud. But Daniel felt it all the same. He began his routine, sweeping leaves near the benches. The movements were slower now, deliberate, but the rhythm was still there. A few minutes later, he noticed a loose plank near the sandbox, something he would have fixed instantly before. He crouched carefully, testing it with his foot, mentally noting what tools he'd need later. A child approached him hesitantly, holding a toy truck. "Are you the man who saved that kid?" the boy asked. Daniel paused, then nodded. "I helped, V." Boy smiled, wide and fearless. "Nah. My mum says you're a hero." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "Your mum sounds very kind," he said. As the child ran off, Daniel stood there for a moment, longer than necessary, staring at the sandbox. He hadn't worn the word hero comfortably, even when it had been attached to his name years ago. Now, it felt heavier than ever. Near noon, a small group gathered near the playground. The same security officer from that day stood awkwardly to one side. After a moment of hesitation, he walked over to Daniel. "Sir," he said, clearing his throat, "I wanted to say, I handled things poorly. I'm sorry." Daniel looked at him, searching for defensiveness, for excuses. He found neither. Just discomfort and something like regret. "Thank you," Daniel said simply. The officer nodded and stepped back, relief visible in his shoulders. That afternoon, a city official arrived, clipboard in hand, talking about recognition, about ceremonies and plaques. Daniel listened politely, then declined just as politely. "The park doesn't need another sign," he said. "It needs maintenance." The official looked confused, then thoughtful. "Okay. Still," he said, "people should know." Daniel smiled faintly. "They already do. That's enough." As days passed, the park settled into a new normal. Daniel noticed fewer careless messes, fewer broken rules. Parents corrected their children when they climbed too high. Teenagers picked up after themselves more often. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the park in gold, Daniel sat on a bench he had repaired years ago. His shoulder ached, but the pain was manageable. He watched families leave, one by one, until the playground was quiet again. For the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel heavy. Daniel stood and locked the shed, the familiar click grounding him. As he walked toward the exit, he passed the oak trees, their branches whispering softly in the breeze. He slowed his steps, letting himself linger. He knew people would forget again. Not completely, but enough. And that was okay. The park would still need cleaning. The swings would still need fixing. Children would still climb too high, and someone would need to be watching. Daniel adjusted the strap of his sling and smiled to himself. It never needed to be seen to matter. But it was good to know that, this time, when it counted, they finally looked.